So welcome everybody. Good morning to one and all. And I'm very glad to be the master of ceremony for this event. And I'll do a quick request to Chris, if I can have the permission to start the event. So Chris, can I start the event?
Yes, please. Yes.
Thank you. So I will share my screen now and we can start the event. Can everybody see my screen, at least on the folks on the video?
Not yet. Yeah, yes, now.
Fantastic. So thank you everybody for joining this event, and I'm going to be the master of ceremony for this event, and I wanted to do a quick agenda review just to make sure that everybody's aware of what are the topics that we're going to be covering, and who are going to be our esteemed speakers throughout the event from 11 a.m. or maybe 11:05. A very important event for both CII and BDO, and we are glad that everybody has been able to join this morning. The times have been tough. Earlier today we were discussing among the speakers, times have been tough, especially, I'm based in Bangalore, and it is, times have been really difficult for us. Everybody's quarantined at home. We have gone into a 14-day quarantine. However, that doesn't stop us from doing our work, right? And today's topic, talking about cybersecurity, as the wave 2 has settled in and it's been disturbing both personal lives and professional. It is an important topic discussed today. At least get varieties of esteemed speakers to give their thoughts. The other thing that I wanted to also just allude to was we need to start thinking about wave 3. There is also a lot of talks about wave 3, and we just need to make sure that do we have certain protocols or measures that we can take now, what we have learned from the wave 1, but also now to upscale our security, upscale our business operations, upscale our aspects of information security in order to get ready for the wave 3, right? So maybe quickly, I'll just go over the agenda. So here we go. For today's agenda, I'm just going to minimize everything on my screen here, right? So today's agenda, after I've done the opening, I will pass it on to Mr. Rajan Navani, who is the chairman and the CII Western. Sorry, I'm just going to say here we go. The CII Western Region Subcommittee, Innovation, Technology, and Digitization for the 21-22, and he's also a vice chairman and managing director of Jet Synthesis, right? Then we will have our Deputy Managing Partner, Mr. Yogesh Sharma, do the report release. Then I will have my colleague Mubin Sheikh, who is a partner and leader for cybersecurity at BDO India, talk about the key highlights of the report and the survey that we conducted as a co-branded event with CII. Then I will have our esteemed guest, Mr. Chris, talk about his thoughts, his viewpoints, some industry remarks. Before we go into a panel discussion with 4 great panelists that we have, and I will introduce them as we come to the panel discussions. And then, of course, Mubin will take some questions, Q&A from the panelists, from the participants, wherever as time permits. And then I will come back to the scene, and I will do the closure. Right. So before I hand it over to Mr. So I want to hand it over to Mr. Rajan now. Mr. Rajan, can you please take over and give us your welcome remarks and start the event? Let's kickstart this event with all blessings from Almighty.
Thanks, Soman, and a very warm welcome and a good morning to everyone as we come to this special session where we officially launch the report on cyber security priorities and business implications in a post-COVID world. As you rightly said, Soumil, we are all going through a very tough time, in the country, but having the zeal to push it through and to continue to look at issues that are going to be extremely relevant, when it comes to a post-COVID world, I think this is one subject which is of immense importance. And I really take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to all our guests, CII members, friends from industry and media who have joined us for this initiative. On behalf of the CII Western region, and I think on my own personal behalf, I would like to extend, of course, a very warm welcome to Chris. Chris Gopalakrishnan is the past president of CII, founder of Accelo Ventures, former vice chairman of Infosys, and really a thought leader in this space. I think, Chris, you have looked at cybersecurity and cyber risk management probably years and decades ago, when the technology boom had started. And today with the pandemic, the acceleration of all of this is so immense, and we really look forward to your views and thoughts, as we move on this subject. I also want to, welcome and particularly thank BDO, Yogesh Sharma, who's the Deputy Managing Partner for BDO India, Mr. Mubin Sheikh, Partner and Leader for Cybersecurity from BDO. I think both of you have really, spent a lot of time as a Saumil to make sure that we are able to highlight the key trends and responses through the survey and provide a very good walkthrough on what the key findings have emerged, as we have looked at cybersecurity as a very strong theme. I also want to thank all the subcommittee members of the CII Western Region Subcommittee on Innovation, Technology and Digitization, who have driven this entire research initiative with great zeal and passion. The team actually went into this topic by talking to industry and really understanding the woes that industry has faced during the pandemic period. And I think this is one major turning point, in the last few months. And many companies have looked at, very different strategic upgrades to the cybersecurity, approach during the lockdown, unlock periods. And I think, the entire research findings in a trend report released in The Shape of the Future, which was undertaken by BDO and CII, I think will reveal a lot of what can happen in the future and how companies really need to adapt to what that could mean for them. The Confederation of Indian Industry, of course, in the Western region, continues to promote an innovation culture amongst the ecosystem. This subcommittee particularly, engages with different innovation ecosystems to see how innovation, research and development can generate significant social public value as well, particularly in light of companies that are then able to, take on digital transformation, be able to innovate and include many others in this process. So I think the ability to bring, fellow CII members from large corporations, MSMEs, startups, and really bring the entire new age technology adoption ecosystem, the future ready workforce, reskilling mindsets, all together in one bucket to really, be able to not only predict what the future would be, but also something that could lead to very concrete actions that multiple stakeholders, can take to realize the optimal value of that future. I think, government policy, industry all really need to move hand in hand together. And I think this subcommittee is trying to, do all of these different aspects. I wanted to talk about this subcommittee because, I think we have some great members and a lot of interesting work happening. And I would encourage CII members from the Western region to really use, the knowledge that is there within the subcommittee to see how your own companies can benefit, further from your own. Of course, today's topic is cybersecurity, and the report, and that's what we are going to be spending time on. Cybersecurity, as we all know, has become an ever-expanding, technology-driven issue in our country. Every second company in India today has experienced a cybersecurity breach, particularly in the last 1 year. Data suggests that around 52% of organizations in India have fallen victim to a cyber security attack in the last 12 months, even though we have the highest percentage of companies with an independent security budget. 71% of the organizations that we spoke to admitted that the attack was a rather serious one. So I think despite cyber attacks increasing, cybersecurity budgets have still remained stagnant. And I think that's probably where, we seem to be underestimating the level of damage or threat that can do to organizations, right? So today, every organization, I think, needs to understand deeper, what cyber breaches are and how can we really be able to, avoid multiple threats that can exploit various vulnerabilities within our organizations. And really the only way to kind of, prevent them is to keep actively hunting for unknown threats and then neutralizing them as it surfaces. Now, in this climate of uncertainty, I think, a lot of organizations would therefore need to see how they would approach, security spending, and which would directly impact their ability to stay ahead of cyber criminals, and cyber attacks. So I think this is one point that we really wanted to highlight, that is the movement in cybersecurity budgets for companies, given, this whole move now that we have to a very strong technologically driven world, right? So if we look at the entire 9 to 5 office environment has changed dramatically. Remote working, which we once expected to be a future, is now a new reality. I mean, what we are doing today, and so many other meetings that go on like this, the collaboration tools that come in, all of these, are abilities for different cybersecurity risks that can come out from outside the office. Millions of people connecting to the corporate networks, network infrastructure being taxed, VPN usage skyrocketing. How do all of these really impact, the cybersecurity environment is something that we need to be able to tactically, work with, right? And I think there are multiple ways, in which, cybersecurity leaders can prepare themselves for this new landscape. And I think, identifying those leaders within organizations is so critical. How do you really build, a culture of cyber resilience, within the company, whether it is unifying, the operational technology, business-facing functions across the organization? How does one really protect critical capabilities and services? I think, that is something that one really needs to be, particularly prioritizing, when it comes to their investments in cyber automation. How do you balance risk-informed decisions during a crisis and beyond? How do you update your practice and response for business continuity plans? How does one strengthen ecosystem-wide collaborations? Because I think it is going to be a far more collective, networked, collaborative world as we see it. And all of these, I think, put out new challenges for all of us. Even the government, has taken this particular matter very seriously. As we are aware, the government has formulated a cyber crisis management plan for countering cyber attacks. It's operating the Cyber Swachhta Kendra, the botnet cleaning and malware analysis center. So even the center is providing detection of malicious programs, tools to everyone to remove the same. So I think there is a concerted effort, across the entire ecosystem to address this issue. So the good news is that each of us is not alone in this. We are all, collectively looking at how we can make this happen. And in this light, I think the CII video report, will be really a great guide on what are the trends, that are emerging, particularly coming out of the pandemic, and how can we really frame, our cyber strategies for the future. So, once again, I want to thank all the stakeholders who have been part of this entire initiative, particularly, again, all the CII members from the Western region, digitization subcommittee, BDO India, all the other members, who have participated and who are here today. And most importantly, I think the CII Secretariat, who have worked tirelessly to bring this report. And we're really looking forward to hearing from BDO about the report, and of course, Chris for his very interesting thoughts on such subjects. And I always know I learn something new from Chris, when he shares his thoughts on all of these subjects. So once again, warm welcome. Thank you for being here, Kevin. Back to you, Soumya. I think you're on mute. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Rajan. Appreciate it. And no further delays. I would want to take permission from Yogesh to bring him on the stage, virtual stage, of course, right? And Yogesh, do I have the permission to run the release video? And then I will all look forward to hearing from you. Can I? Okay.
Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. I'm just gonna play the release video now. Siju, I think I will need permissions to share the video again. Sorry, I think we have some technical difficulties. Siju, I just need permission again. Thank you. Share it. So I'm just going to have Yogesh now just provide his comments related to the release of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Somil, and thank you everyone for your presence today in this virtual event. Thank you to Chris and Rajan for the preface, and it's our privilege that we are able to host this event in your presence, and which includes your views and thoughts. I would like to take this opportunity and provide a bit of a background on why this survey. We had this discussion going on within video for some time with respect to this survey, and we have been receiving numerous calls, numerous inquiries with respect to cybersecurity breaches, cyber attacks, data losses, phishing in their organizations. And we thought there could be an interesting survey which could come out and provide much more knowledge to the industry peers on how every organization is currently facing these challenges and what cyber strategies possibly they have in place. And obviously, we have been reading a lot about cybersecurity challenges in the pandemic time. And hence the Video Cyber team decided to come out with this industry-led surveys to find out key issues, what industry peers are thinking, what challenges they are facing day to day, with obviously additional inputs from our side, and a great support, I must say, from CII to join with us for this survey. We did this survey in Q3, Q4 of last year through various channels, including CII member list, our own clients. And today we have this opportunity to present this report to you. Again, I would like to personally thank CII for supporting us in this important initiative. And while I personally went through some of the findings, such as cyber budgets, cyber posture assessments, it really gave me a very different perspective. And I would request and encourage all of you and those other business leaders who are your friends, who are just not CISO and CTO, may find this very relevant information, what is included in survey report. Without further delay, I would request Video Cyber Security Leader, Mubin Sheikh, to provide us more insights and outcomes of this survey. Thank you once again, and I'll sign off from here now.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. It's a pleasure to hear you always. And again, on behalf of Video, I really want to thank Chris to be part of this session. And what I will do is that what Yogesh has told, I will take it forward. I will request Somil to share the screen with the slides so that we can start the discussion. And as you have said, as seen in this video, what we thought that we should do a survey. But as you know, the cybersecurity is a very, very vast topic. Although we know that cybersecurity means hacking, but cybersecurity is not just the technology security, it talks about a lot many other things. And there were a lot many surveys which were going on. So, but we thought that what are the top 3 things we should take to our clients, take to our networking connection, and get their view, which will help the industry as such. And that's where we thought that we'll take the 3 main domains: cyber attacks, which is an obvious. We all have faced it, whether we liked it or not. We all have faced it, but we wanted to bring out saying that what is the industry talking about it? What is the real? Is it a perceived notion of me, or is it real in the life? Then enterprise risk management. This is the one topic where most of us, although we wanted to do something, we are not doing it because it's a larger than life subject, enterprise risk management. So we said that we will touch this. We'll take our bet to touch this topic. And third, see, we all have in mind saying that I should be one step ahead, but we all know that on hacker or the bad mind is always one step ahead. So how can I have in this a very fragile, very dynamic environment, my cyber security strategy is there for the future? So we took these three domains and talk about it. Now, first, when we went to our clients, and what the survey has revealed is that we all know, but let's face the truth that we have faced the cyber attack during the pandemic. We have seen this. Seen this in the newspaper. We have spoken to our clients. Our clients have given the SOS. Our friends who are running the SME industry, small industries, have got this kind of an attack. So, Saumil, if you go to the next slide, and I want to show the statistics to all the participants on what kind of a cyber attacks is there. One good part, as he said, everybody said that the first stage of correction is an admission. And this is where I think the maturity of the Indian industry has come up, saying that the almost 80% of people have accepted. Whether they have reported, whether they have done anything is a different thing, but they have accepted that they have got some kind of an attack in the pandemic period. And when I'm talking about the pandemic, I'm talking about the last 12 months. And in those pandemic, when 80% have got an attack, what kind of attack was the most important attack? And when we asked this to our participants of the survey, the 1/3 of the people said that they've got the phishing attack as one of the most important attack or the biggest attack in the cybersecurity journey. Then imagine this. See, we all are corporates. The emails is the lifeline of communication. The industry is working on the communication, and the communication is getting breached. 1/3 of our communications are getting phished. This is the most important thing. This is not a thing to be really look after, but this is the thing to be worried about. 1/3 attacks are coming, and phishing attacks are very sophisticated. Gone are those days where people are talking about I'm a Nigeria king, I've left a few million dollars for your inheritance. Those are not the phishing attacks. Now there are the spear phishing attack. The attacks will come to your specialized email IDs. Attacks will be talking to your language. Attacks will be talking to your culture. People are reading your emails for 2 months, 3 months. They are looking at it and they are sending the mails, and they are exploiting this insider threat so much very well that you get too prone to the phishing attack. And in phishing attack, one thumb rule which I have learned from my experience is that how much of a data-based system you have, in the end, everybody will click on the link. And this survey has proved that. And this survey says that phishing attack is one attack where everybody in the industry and my friends in the industry, please look out for this attack. So once we saw that what is an attack, we said that, so what are these attacks are causing? What are the top 3 things these attacks are causing? So top 3 things, and to my surprise, top thing is not the financial impact, although it's one of the top 3 things, but the first important thing is the disruption of service. And now if we took this in a context of a pandemic, it becomes very important, saying that if I would have been a more trusted environment, more secure physical environment, a disruption of service may not be that important because I have a different ways and means of connecting. I will have a separate link. I will have a different user working on it. I might have a different hardware. But if you have a people working from home in a distributed environment, if they're trying to deliver the services, and if they are attacked, the disruption of the service will be most important aspect. And I think the server brings out of it. Second thing, and this is where the Indian industry has matured, that we are very sensitive to data loss. We are very sensitive to the privacy now. We have improved that from very much in the last decade. And that's the second most important. And third, although which is linked to the first one, is the financial impact. But the third one is also important, saying that a disruption of service, disruption of the loss of data might have a financial impact, because whether we are in a manufacturing segment, whether we are in the service IT segment, Indian economy is a services economy, and any disruption will cause a financial impact or revenue loss. That's where the top three losses which were told to us by the industry, and based on our general knowledge, this can be proved also. And one of the important things which I wanted to bring out very specifically is Sodinovoki malware. That's important. Ransomware. That's important. Keep the eye. The name is important. If you get across some ransomware, look about this thing, that is this the ransomware, because this is the ransomware which was used by many cyber criminals during the pandemic. We need to be aware of these things. And it has such a great algorithm, saying that decryption was close to impossible. So that's where it was very lethal during the pandemic period. Now, when we saw the attacks as one of the theme, it actually proved our thesis around, saying that what we know was actually happening and what we were thinking about the losses were the actual losses in the industry. Then we went to the enterprise risk management section. And we asked this question on the next slide, saying that was an industry ready for COVID-19 risk? Well, this is obvious. There was an obvious answer in that. Last time when we did a pandemic preparedness, it was a bird flu. It was more on a medical preparedness. But in last decade, after that, there was no pandemic preparedness. So was our enterprise risk management framework geared up to see that we have COVID-19 related risk being addressed or pandemic risk being addressed? And not to a surprise, 68% people have said that we were not ready to address pandemic related risk in our enterprise risk management. See, India is the land of the warriors. We all address our situation as it comes. We all address our situation, or we always work in a crisis mode. But do we have a standard risk management framework to address COVID-19 risk? It was not there, and it has actually been proven by the survey. So then, if you don't have, do you want to make your enterprise risk management updated? Do you want to be ready for that? And yes, that's again the one thing which will prove, saying that 73% believe that they need to update the risk management framework. And when we are going to our clients, when we are talking to our clients, when we are discussing with the peer industry, there's a huge work going on, saying that how do I have a dynamic evolving risk around this? And that's where got proved with our survey, saying that an enterprise risk management, everybody needs to update. At least look at the last 12 months experience, look at the risk exposure, look at the surface exposure, and update the enterprise risk management framework. That's where the two key important things which has come out of the enterprise risk management. Now, how are we ready for the future cybersecurity strategy? That's one question which all of us have asked. So, but we know, and this is one thing which was not very encouraging for me as an individual. See, when we went from the very trusted environment, very physical environment, to a distributed environment, remote from working from home not for the critical resources, but working from home for every resources, which includes your admin staff, secretarial staff, your technical staff. We knew that risk has increased. Somewhere in the mind it was there. But did we do something around it? One thing which came out of is that, and this is during the start of the period, saying that 88% of organizations have kept their budget to the cybersecurity to the same level or have reduced. And this is very concerning. And I believe somewhere this keeping the budget to the same level, although the risk have multifold, or reducing it to a certain level because we need to take care of something else, or economy has shrunk, has somewhere contributed towards the rise in the attack in last 12 months. This is one area which I think we should always keep a time, so that if there is a change in the risk, we should ensure that there's appropriate resources are allocated to it. And how that got proved, saying that 72% of people, in their subconscious mind, believe that because the working has changed, because the protocols have changed, the cybersecurity posture has somewhat reduced. How much reduced? We did not ask that because we did not want to go in depth, but we wanted to understand that what is their gut feeling. And 72% of feel that they have their cybersecurity posture somewhat reduced. That means that my CISOs, my CTOs are on the toes. They every night, every time they are thinking that will I get attacked? And this is not a good sign. And these are the two foundation pillars where they're to build the cybersecurity strategy. And when you're building the cybersecurity strategy, first thing what you need to do is that you need to know where am I. That's first thing. Where am I? As everybody said that in cybersecurity, the one size for all does not fit. We need to know where am I. Am I in industry in the Pune working on the IT services versus I'm in industry in Bangalore as an IT services? Irrespective of the size, your risk exposure is different. So you need to know where do you stand. And that's where I think one positive outcome of this survey is that people are doing that work. Around 68% of the people are actually revisiting their cybersecurity. They have started some kind of a cybersecurity review or they have done some kind of a cybersecurity review. That's a good thing to start. Second important thing is that the people have realized they cannot stop all the cyber attack. They cannot stop all the breaches. What they need to use is that they need to use the risk transference strategy. That's most important thing. And they have used it very effectively. But how effectively? Because and if I want to use some strategy, the ecosystem needs to support it. And this is where the India as an ecosystem have failed a little bit on the cyber insurance, because one of the most important risk transference is that can I buy a cyber insurance? And then what is the thought process for the general public in the mind about the cyber insurance? So 37%, I'm just going to give the two statistics. 37% people said that cyber insurance is still not evolved very much in the industry. And let's agree on to the fact that today, if you go back to the buying the cyber insurance, and there are very 2 or 3 players who give the cyber insurance, the checklist for buying the cyber insurance versus the checklist for buying the home insurance, somewhat same. Let's face it, because admission is the first step for the correction. So 37% of people have brought that point. But whether it is good, bad or not, but having a risk transference strategy, 20%, which means that 1 of the 5 companies have already bought in the cyber insurance in the last 12 to 18 months, which is a good step, because cyber insurance buying was not at all in the radar of the Indian industry, and they have started doing that. That's one thing. And these are the 2 things which one should definitely do when they are building the cybersecurity for the future. And when you build the cybersecurity strategy for the future, don't think about the technology. I want to give 2 different thoughts in the next slide about what other 3 things we talk about. First, regulatory requirement. If you are in a regulatory environment, the regulators are giving lot many inputs, lot many scripted requirements. Please ensure that the regulatory requirement goes back as part of your strategy. It's not just a technology. Second, make a cyber as a business enabler. Don't make as a cyber as a protection tool only. Make it as a business enabler. And the third, which is a cliche statement, but we all need to fix, saying that fix the responsibilities. Our survey said that still 17% believe that the cyber is only an IT or CISO responsibility. It is not. So fix the responsibility, fix the accountability, and take these 3 inputs as an input for building your future cybersecurity strategy. That's what has surveys brought on. On a personal front, I want to put what I've put in the next slide, and which is a very radical thought. I personally believe that this pandemic has become an anno domini moment for the cybersecurity of technology. After 30 years or 50 years down the line, when people will talk about the pandemic, from the cybersecurity perspective, they will say that what was my cybersecurity posture or approach before the pandemic, and what was my cybersecurity approach after the pandemic. Why I'm saying so, and I'm going to take one of the large company who works out of their own large off premises. So it is a physically secure area, physically secure network, verified individuals, and you put in all together the controls around that. But pandemic has changed everything. You don't have a physical space which is secure enough. You don't know the geography. You don't know the people. You don't know the hardware. You don't know the link. Everything is different. And in this very vital environment, how do you put controls? And hence, I personally believe this is an anno domini moment for the cybersecurity. And this is what our survey has brought it out. And I'm happy to work with CII to bring that survey to you. I'll request everybody to download and read that survey. Thank you so much, and over to you, Somil.
Thank you, Momin. Wonderful. I know phishing has been a very, it has been definitely increasing over the past 12 to 18 months, and it's been very prevailing. That was the right word I was looking for. It was very prevailing because now, right from youngsters to professionals to older people are being scammed through phishing, whether it is through OTPs or whether it's through emails, just to create damage for them, right? So before I move on, I just wanted to thank Mubin for your insights, and now I will humbly request Chris to grace us with his industry remarks, provide his insights, and take us to the next the next session. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Somil, and let me start by complimenting CII Western Region, the committee that has launched this exclusive report, the CII BDO report on cybersecurity priorities and business implications in a post-COVID world. I was fascinated by some of the insights from the report. 80% increase in cyber attacks, but 88% of people say that the budget is same or reduced, and 72% believe the posture, cyber security posture, has been reduced. That does not augur well for us. I think the timing of this report in that sense is right, and I hope that this report will increase the awareness amongst our members, amongst industry partners, and all of them will take the necessary steps to improve their cybersecurity. I will come back to how I believe it should be done, but before doing that, let me also start by saying that it's all of us who have to be responsible and make sure that we, our family, our friends, our employees, our colleagues, all of us stay safe, keep our environment safe, keep our people around us safe, which means masking, which means physical distancing, which means sanitizing our hands. It means COVID appropriate behavior. I think it's very, very important. The virus is still around us, and it's also important that as soon as your turn comes to get vaccinated, please get vaccinated so that we can put this behind us. The key word there is responsibility and responsible behavior, and I'm tying that to today's topic about cybersecurity, which is again responsibility and responsible behavior. See, in the last few months, in the last 12 months, two things have happened. One, of course, is the acceleration of digital, and our life today, professional and personal life, is more digital than ever before. We depend on digital technologies for all forms of interactions, communication, collaboration, doing work. Everything now is done digitally and more than ever before. Even functions like these, releasing a report today, happens over a digital medium. So everything has become digital, and with that transition, of course, crime also has become more, and crime has, of course, become digital, and the criminals have become smarter in the ways in which they will exploit the situation. The second thing is the transition to work from home. It's easier to talk about security from a physical perspective. If the work was being done in a physical premises, you have security guards, the network, the equipment, devices that are connected on the network, and it can be secured because you can physically touch and feel these equipments. They are in a campus that is secure. Expanding that campus to virtually to all the homes of all the employees means that this is not under your control anymore. Physically, there is no security possible because you have to secure every employee's home. The devices that are connected come through now networks that are public networks. Previously also, some of the employees were allowed to connect remotely, but now almost all employees, especially the white collar work, happens remotely. At home, for example, you step away from your machine and the machine still may be on and somebody else can access that machine, even if it is actually a work computer. And the Wi-Fi networks at home, etc., are not as secure as the networks in the corporate world. So, we have actually increased the cybersecurity threats. I would assume that manifold in this transition to work from home. Having said that, it's a tremendous achievement by the industry, by the employees and the leadership of the industry to transition so many people in such a short period of time to work from home. Probably the biggest story in cybersecurity last year was the SolarWinds story. SolarWinds is a security software provider or network software provider in the US with about 33,000 clients. And amongst its clients are its who is who. Microsoft is a client, Cisco is a client, many of the US government agencies, Department of Defense, the Treasury, all of these are clients to SolarWinds. So what did the hackers do? They actually hacked into SolarWinds development network, development computers, installed their virus into a piece of software called Orion. And the next time this software was downloaded, and as you know, updates are automatic, updates happen periodically. When this software was downloaded by all the clients of SolarWinds, and approximately 18,000 clients of SolarWinds actually downloaded this software and installed in their system. And lo and behold, this software opened up a backdoor to these systems, and many other hacking software were installed, and nobody truly knows the extent of hack that happened, and all these systems were compromised. Now, this is the largest economy, the most developed economy, with budgets several $1 billion. Imagine the budgets of even companies like Microsoft or Cisco in terms of security, etc. They were compromised, and this was undetected, for many months actually, and it was accidentally detected, and of course, then it got fixed. But the key here is, in today's world, the threats can come from anywhere. All of us download software today, and our lives revolve around apps on our mobile devices. Our lives revolve around third-party software that we use on our systems. How trusted are these? How tested are these from a cybersecurity perspective, etc. is very, very difficult. Now, in such a world, how do you believe it can be done, right? How do you think it can be done? Before I come to that, I want to also talk about one more aspect of this. That is, the ability to capture our data in transit. I strongly believe that that is also a threat that we need to be aware of, actually. We talk about privacy, right? We share our data freely today to get certain services. And during the lockdown, of course, a lot of the purchases are happening online. A lot of purchases from enterprises are also happening online. And we share a lot of data now. One, to make those purchases. Second, also to feed us with information about products that are available, new products, revisions to products and things like that, sales that happen. And all of this will require data to be shared. And again, we freely share these today, but it has to be done very, very carefully. One thing I do personally, all my browsing and e-commerce happens on a different computer than the one I use for work. One I use for example, e-commerce, or one I use for banking transactions, or one I use for my work and things like that. So the one I use for browsing is very different from the one I use for work and things like that. So that as much as possible, I keep these things separate. And bring your own device, broke this actually, because it was previously company-owned personal devices. It is assigned to a person, but it's company-owned. But today we have transitioned to bring your own device, and that creates actually significant challenges. So how do we create a environment which is a culture of cybersecurity? And I also believe that security has to be by design. It can't be an afterthought. It cannot be something that we can firefight when a breach happens. It has to be by design. And when I say by design, first is awareness. We need to be aware about what are the potential threats based on the business that we are in, the technology that we are using, the architecture that we have. So for example, is work from home allowed? Is personal devices to be allowed to be connected? Are we using public Wi-Fi networks? Which pieces of software that we are using? A complete inventory and a risk assessment has to be done based on the architecture that you have, the software that you have, etc. Second is education and training. This is extremely important. Education and training of the specialists that you have, because they have to be up to date on what the threats are and what the new tools are and things like that. Two, every employee in the company, because every employee is a digital native today. He or she is using digital resources to do his or her work actually. So all of them need to be trained on basics of cybersecurity, the tools and techniques that they need to use. What is two-factor authentication? Why is it necessary? Why you need to be very careful when you browse, when you share information, etc. And the third piece is technology. The tools and techniques and the technology that runs your network, your machines, etc. Because they have to be up to date and they have to be having the latest patches and things like that. So the technology piece and the special tools that you use for cybersecurity. The fourth piece is the the standard operating procedures, the processes, the systems, etc. So, for example, do you use two-factor authentication? Do you force people to change their passwords periodically? At what regularity do they change their passwords? Your policies, regulations, your processes, and things like that. And they need to then be set in place. And this has to be part of the training manual also. Then this has to be audited and reviewed by a second party, by somebody who didn't come up with all these things, who's a person specializing on security audit and things like that, to make sure that one, the technology is correct, two, the processes are appropriate, you looked at all aspects of it, and people are trained and people are capable of performing these tasks appropriately. Some of the cases you also will have to include partners in these audits, etc., because they connect to your network. And last but not the least is review, repeat. This is a continuous process. This keeps on evolving as time goes on, as new threats are there, as well as when new tools happen also. A lot of automation of many of these things happen today. You get automated scripts, you get AI machine learning tools, which allow you to automate many of these things. But this 6-step process: awareness, education and training, the technology, systems and processes, an audit process, and continuous improvement are the 6 steps, I believe, very important for ensuring that you create a proactive security by design. So let me thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on a very important topic, very timely topic, and I hope all the people who participated today take full advantage of what the report has revealed, because the report has highlighted the importance of having an appropriate budget, having an awareness, and making sure that you take proactive steps to act on it. Because I was worried when the survey said 72% believe the posture has been reduced, which is not a good sign. I would have assumed that 72% said the posture has actually been a lot more aware and seizes the importance of cybersecurity. So thank you all and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Chris. Wonderful, thought-provoking inputs. I think just to, I think some of the takeaways I had before I, start the panel discussion, I think awareness, Chris, is very, very important. The other piece is, making sure that you're changing with the, with the technology, right? So as you evaluate new technologies, you need to embed, say, cybersecurity and information security at the epicenter of those changes that you are coming into play. The other thing that I really liked about is, separating your personal computer with the work computer. And today, I can tell you that, people working from home, your point is very, very valid, that how many of the other family members have access to the same computer, which could put you, your oneself or your data or the company's data to exposure. So I think that's a wonderful thing. I think one of the takeaways is to keep 2 separate computers if possible. Fantastic. Thanks, Chris, for your wonderful thoughts. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start having my panelist and the moderator come onto the virtual platform. And let me share the deck. So as part of the today's panel discussion being hosted by my dear colleague Mubin, we have Milind, who's an Executive Vice President and CISO of NSDL E-Governance Infrastructure Limited. So welcome, Milind. We have Saurabh Chatterjee, President and Head of the IT department at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance. So welcome, Saurabh. We have Anantaraman. He's a country head for the India market for Cognizant. And last but not, of course, the least, of course, Yogesh, who's the Chief Digital Officer of Kalyani Group and of course the Senior Vice President of Bharat Forge Limited. So welcome my dear panelist and Mubin, the moderator. I would look forward to hearing from each of the panelists and of course I hope for the best outcome from the panel discussions.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I will just keep this slide for a minute and then you can remove the slide. Okay.
Sure, I will do that.
And this is for all the participants. I think this is one of the most heterogeneous, if I may call, most diverse, if I may call, the cyber panel talking about the cyber security. I have the one of the key government organizations or quasi-government organizations, CISO with me. I have a domestic insurance giant CTO with me. I have the global IT services country head with me, and I have a chief digital officer of one of the key manufacturing, which was a pioneer of their manufacturing segment in their time with me. All of us are going to talk about the cybersecurity. I think this is one of the most diverse panel we have got, and thank you for all of us. To all my participants on this session, I can tell you that all these four gentlemen in together in this panel will bring you community of more than a century of experience. And next 30 minutes or so, 30 to 35 minutes or so, I want to take some of the questions which I believe should be answered by the industry veterans and then ask them. So before I go into anything in detail for the delay, I want to start with the questions directly. Thanks, Somil, and you can remove the screen now, slide now. The first, I think I will start with you, Saurabh, and then it's pleasure. And one more thing which just kept in mind is that we all talking about the Pune for the bad reason, but today in this event, if you look at in this panel, there are three panelists, me, Saurabh, and Yogesh Zope from Pune, and Rajan is also from Pune. So Pune is also a good place to be in, not just bad place from the COVID numbers. So Saurabh, I want to start with you. And I've known you for many years, and you're always a very admirer of the new technology, and you want to use the new technology for the business. And same goes with your insurance giant group. Now, use of new technology is important, but when it comes during the pandemic time, the most important thing for the insurance companies was to keep the business as usual going on, and you were if I may call it a frontline company to be working and all the time, because we were needing you all the time. So how did you keep that? What is your story in last 12 to 18 months, if you can share with our participants?
Sure. Thank you, Mubin, and thanks for inviting me. Hope everyone is keeping healthy and safe. I know, Pune is in the news for all the wrong reasons, but I think things are getting better, and we are also trying to help out wherever we can. See, just to the question, I'll just bring in the practitioner's view of what we have been through. So our story. See, interestingly for us, pandemic was not a difficult period, but a great learning experience. I always say on the positive side of things, right? It was not difficult because our 5-year transformation program had been underway since 2016, and some of the basic components were in place, whether it is the mobile endpoint devices, like laptops and all. We had insisted on that. So the first sign of at that point when the lockdown was announced, I think was around the portable devices. So things like instead of BYOD, while we have a BYOD policy, it was a TYOD, right? Take your own device. We have it available, right? Take it, because it's hardened, it is secure. We know, we have control over that. That was one point where we were prepared. Things like availability and access of applications over the internet. This becomes important because depending on the kind of applications they were accessing, and some are very specific, like investments and all needed a completely different approach versus say employee applications and all. Our cloud transition helped because we were already, on a workload-wise basis, going step by step on that. They were ready. Even our work from home models were ready, and whether it was access through VPN or through VDIs, or the digitization of our core processes for our customers, intermediaries, and all, they were in place. So from this part, I think we had the preparedness and the readiness was there. In fact, on 23rd March, and this time 2021, it was like a deja vu, right? A week before that, we did a mock drill for our 2,000 people, out which was around 15-20% of our workforce, and we could figure out any kind of rough edges around it. So that has been during those 2-3 weeks was our experience. But what happened after that was important. There was a big learning experience after that. See, from a business standpoint, just our consumer base or our partners or intermediaries, right? We had the self-service tools available, right? Whether it was the externalization in terms of straight-through issuance percentage. This is a big number from an insurance industry standpoint, irrespective of the kind of product, right? Because many products go through directly, many products, go through referral and other processing. That number was high, but it was still hovering around 30-40%, while we saw that number go up suddenly to 80, 90, 95% even. And that put a pressure on, obviously the backend infrastructure being able to, run it through and being able to scale it in a very short period of time. Our self-service tools for our customers, which was like the AIML enabled, very simple bots, right, which we had prepared. That adoption suddenly went through the roof. And, and in a distributed environment, we were talking about everyone using it. But our biggest learning during that period was probably the endpoint connectivity and people behavior. See, awareness around people. Some user groups needed more support, more handholding than others would need. Things around the topic of this discussion, right? Data security. Now, in a true work from home environment, we realized the limits of the controls, the procedures that we could put in. So tools was not an issue as long as the interaction was happening through that device which we provided, right, was not an issue. But then, what if someone takes a picture of, the screen from their own, some of those things which we had never experienced at a large scale. While this was going on, we never see this from a large scale. And the other thing which was another learning for us was the policies, procedures, awareness, training had to be really ramped up. I would say one last point was the partial work from home also was a big learning experience. See, because when things started opening up, people were partially working from home, partially working from office, coming in, going out. So, so that was another, because that needed again the processes to be adapted to the new way of working. In summary, it was a learning experience. We thrived during the lockdown because a lot of projects got fast-tracked. Things like, and in the survey, I was also surprised, as was just mentioned, in fact, on our side, not just the budget allocation was increased, but even more the awareness from an enterprise risk management, cyber and pandemic risks just went right up there, even for our board. That helps us, as a technology owner within the organization and as a digital owner, because I run the P&L for digital. It is also important that even from business perspective, business leaders started to see this much beyond the crisis. And everyone saw this as an opportunity to further innovate, further disrupt the insurance value chain for the benefit of all our stakeholders. So this has been our experience. I would just like to add, see, no one, it would be foolish of me to say that we have all the answers. It is a continuous learning. This is a whole course which is continuously, going forward. Obviously, the bad actors are continuously innovating, even faster at many times. So it is every day we learn. And every day we learn, assimilate, and then in a coherent manner, try to formulate our response. So that's what has been helpful.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this input, and I will definitely come back to you. But before that, let me ask Anant. Anant, see, like the companies like of or companies like of me, we work for our company. But when you talk about the industry in the IT services environment, you are managing the very critical infrastructure of your clients. So your organization continues very prime important for them. That's one part. And second part is that doing a work from home for a few thousand people, few hundred people is important. Okay. But doing for a few 100,000 people is a challenge. And that volume becomes a very tedious. So how, as an IT services firm, leading IT services firm globally, how have you managed this for your organization? Anant?
Sure. Thanks, Mubin. So firstly, a very warm good afternoon to all my co-panelists, distinguished guests and colleagues who have joined this forum. So as you rightly put it, Mubin, when you are looking at executing work which is critical in nature for a whole host of clients across the globe, this obviously, as you can imagine, becomes an extremely critical component. The good news is that, as many large-scale service providers would find themselves in, we also were at a fair degree of maturity, thankfully, even before the pandemic started, in the context of being able to operate from remote locations, being able to kind of have access protocols put in place. So at one level, I would say there was a degree of maturity that was already existential within the organization as you try and engage in some of these scenarios. Having said that, goes without saying, the scale at which we kind of saw this panning out was unprecedented, and it did take a couple of weeks for us to kind of get this on in place. So there were multiple dimensions to this. On one side, as Saurav was alluding to, the whole aspect of logistics. When you look at mobilizing the devices for all of your, multiple thousands of workers, and we have a employee strength which is 200,000 odd folks in India, right? So the scale at which you're looking at is phenomenal. So not just in your main locations in your metros, but mobilizing these devices for tier 3, tier 4 Mofussil locations and all that, and establishing the right level of connectivity that is required to render the kind of deliverables that we sign up for was very critical. So there was this whole track associated with mobilizing and the whole logistics part of it. Then the second dimension associated with it was setting up all the access protocols, what level of accessibility is given to what level of associates, employees, and having a clear view around all of that and traceability around that, right? That's the second dimension. The third is also, you have to, while this is not something that you stare at every day, the whole dimension associated with the contractual obligations that you sign up with your clients, right? So there are liability positions, there are various deliverables that you sign up for, and it's extremely important to kind of look at that and see, are we kind of ensuring that the right level of data protections are being adhered to? Because when you move from a secure ODC kind of an environment or a classical corporate environment, as Chris was alluding to, a work from home environment, there are, and Saurav also mentioned about that, there are naturally areas of checks and balances that you need to bring about. So what is the level of contractual obligation do you have with clients? How do you kind of ensure that you mitigate some of those? All of those are extremely critical. Then the other dimension is the employee behavior, right? You effectively, and again, it was being discussed earlier in this forum, the whole aspect associated with the basic knowledge curation of what is required when you start looking at suspicious mails that come to you, because a lot of the propagation of these attacks are through mails in many instances, as we have seen in the past, right? So ensuring that you have the basic level of education administered and constantly being refreshed is a very basic tenet of how you go about this, because beyond a point, when you have a distributed work environment, there is only so much that you can do from a centralized control standpoint. There is a lot of self-discipline that needs to be brought about by associates and employees who are doing operations on a day-to-day basis. There is so much that you can do in terms of limiting access, ensuring the connectivity is right and all that. But beyond of that, there is also what do you do to ensure that you don't go about clicking on the wrong link and or what is a suspicious link, right? And these are very sophisticated players, as we know now, because and again, I kind of completely echo the sentiments mentioned by Chris, because in 2020 there have been so many ransomware attacks. There have been on a daily basis, I believe, there are some thousands of attacks that happen across phishing, ransomware, vulnerability, all of that, right? So there is an absolute exponential increase in what is happening today, and therefore it becomes extremely critical for us to kind of keep ourselves. And again, we are again one of those organizations who have stepped up our budgets and our scrutiny around this, just like Saurav mentioned. So we thankfully don't fall in that 72%, but it's important to ensure that everybody is conscious and looking at this in a holistic way. So those are my few thoughts, Mubin. I'll take a pause.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ananta, for that. And now I want to bring the most critical infrastructure management person and CISO for that infrastructure, Milind, in the discussion. Milind, somewhere we all are dependent on you managing the security of the most critical infrastructure for the India. And I'm sure you will have your own ups and downs during this pandemic period, or work from home, or changing the surface or exposure. What has the NSDL's learnings are? You want to share a few without divulging the too much confidential information with our participants?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, and very good afternoon to all of you. Before I respond to your question, I would also like to say that I am native to Pune, though I'm not working in Pune. So,
so you have to be a bit louder. We can't hear you, Milind.
Yeah. So before I respond to your question, I would like to say I am native to Pune, so I'm one of you, though I'm not working in Pune.
Great.
And I definitely would like to say a few things with regards to the initial days. Just about a year back, we are in April. Somewhere in March mid, it was already the winds were blowing that there will be a lockdown. And when the Janta curfew was declared, definitely it was known that there will be a lockdown. But the time which was given was very, very less. So within a week's time preparing for it, and especially for the organization like us, unlike many other organizations, we had a lot of office centric work. Like, we had hardly 10% of the people who were operating remotely, and specifically those people who were required to travel a lot or who were required to operate from remote places were operating remotely. But otherwise, most of the people would come to the office and work. So in such an environment, one of the biggest challenges is that mostly you go for desktops and not laptops. So arranging for covering up 90% of the staff with the laptops, be it your own or be it rental laptops, becomes a great challenge. And I'm sure many organizations prior to that would have the same kind of a problem, because most of the organizations would have desktops, and laptops arrangement would be happening only by the rental laptops. So those who were offering rental laptops also had a constraint with them. They were getting booked very fast. So first 15 days went into establishing all those things. So out of that, what learning we have got is that we have got to also be prepared to allow people to use their own device. So just now Saurav called out about TOID. So we coined a term called UOID, use your own device, whatever device you are using. But only what we asked was, let us inspect your device. So once you decide that you want to use your own device, give us an access to that device. We will inspect whether there are any issues which can have an impact on our network, and we will fix it. For example, if you have your own device but don't have an antivirus, we'll put an antivirus license on it. If it is not patched, we will patch it. If you don't have a licensed software, we'll give you the licensed software. So there was a very quick process worked out, and it was a replicable process. So it was distributed across all the support engineers, asking them to just carry out those steps so that the devices are available and ready for use very quickly. In less than 15 days, I think 15 days to 3 weeks, everyone was operational, barring about 8 to 10% of the people who traveled out to their villages in that time. And that is where the problem started. The second most important thing, which even Saurabh mentioned and Krish mentioned, was with regards to the awareness part. So immediately it was necessary that everyone were given a recall for all their cybersecurity awareness sessions and learnings and all that. So, and mainly from the point of view of phishing, because as far as central system is concerned, it was fortified. Whether you are working from office or whether you are working from home or whatever, central system had always been fortified. It is never having any impact because someone is working from office or home. You don't trust anyone outside the data center, whether it is an office person or outside person. But what was important was that suddenly the policy of monitoring the traffic had to be changed overnight. What kind of policies we were putting were that people should not be connecting on VPN during office hours because they're working from office. Why should they connect from VPN? And suddenly we had to change because everyone was connecting through VPN in the office. So when in the first day, when we actually opened up the VPN gateway for everyone, there were huge amount of false positives. And the security resolver team was literally up the whole night, weeding out all those. And the security operations center was up the whole night to set up the policies so that such kind of false positives don't come. But as an outcome of this, what I would like to say is the learning was that whatever you set at a periodicity, even if it is as a routine work, you should keep on reviewing these things. The policies, the processes, most of us will agree that policies and processes get reviewed only when auditor points out that you have not reviewed. As a routine, as a discipline of an ongoing operations, the policies are not reviewed that frequently because there are so many other priorities to attend to. Yes. So I think that is one of the most important thing, and we did imbibe that within our process. So today we have a process to review the process. We have a process to review the policies. So that was something which we have done. And
Sure.
over a period of time, we will enhance that into automated mechanisms.
Perfect.
And the third thing is that while everyone said that they were ready and providing services or providing operations from home was not a problem for them, and in 2-3 weeks time, almost all organizations got ready for such kind of processes. What has become the biggest problem is the support. If there is a problem with the hardware that the user is using at his home, providing
Remote
with an alternative mechanism or making sure that the engineer is able to attend to it is out of question. You can't reach him an alternate device. In office, if his laptop or desktop congs off, immediately from the store you pull out another device, connect it to his network and get him started. Here that is not the question. Even if it is a VDI, whatever device he is using to connect to the VDI can also fail, as much
Yes.
dumb it may be.
That's
So
correct.
that is something which is a question which slowly we are trying to address, and over a period of time, I'm sure we'll find a complete solution to that. Practically, it is not possible to give 2 devices to anyone so that if one fails, he can use the other one. But we'll have to find some other solution to it. Whatever can happen remotely by using the platforms and tools, remote access is taken and the problems are solved. But it's not able to connect at all, what do we do? So these are a few of the questions are still unanswered, unaddressed, even after 1.5 years of lockdown.
So it's a journey which we need to continue finding the answers.
Yeah, and it will continue for a long time to come,
Okay.
because even after the pandemic is over, no one is going to give a clear assurance that, okay, now the pandemic is over. Don't
No,
worry
it's-
about anything.
Yeah, that's true. Perfect. Thank you so much, Milind, for your thoughtful input. Now let me bring Yogesh into picture. And I think, Yogesh, I think you are completely different profile than what other panelists are. Because, and I want to put you on the spot. Sorry for that. Saying that everybody is talking about the work from home, working remotely, having my employees being in my native place. I want their safety first. But when you talk about the manufacturing, which is of your core, which is required for the economy to run, unless until you have a digital manufacturing, unless until you have adopted Industry 4.0, it's very difficult. And how a manufacturing unit like you adopted this pandemic situation? Your inputs will be very useful for all our participants. Yogesh?
Yes, thank you, Mubin. I think though industries are different, I think initial challenge for giving access to the office network was more or less same. And as Milind rightly pointed out, since Bharat Forge being a manufacturing company, most of the people come from outside also. So not many people travel back to their native places where right from connectivity, all sort of challenges were there. Only good thing which I would say from our part was we were ready with at least VDI infrastructure. And though in typical in our industry, you don't need to give VDI to everyone. But then somehow we have sized this for a very large number, and which we could leverage for giving access from home computers or any device they have. At least they should be able to connect to their system in the office and work. Now here challenge started with engineering design largely, because VDI was never enabled for engineering design from that perspective. It's very difficult, and then unless you really need this, you are not going to invest into those kind of things. As you rightly said, before and after COVID, lot of mindset change has happened in looking towards these technologies also. So there, our thought process, of course, was to at least have someone in office and ensure that their workstations are on and they are able to take remote of their workstations. Very simple solution, but then on the VPN VDI environment, we enabled that, and that too, and it was only limited into VDI environment. So at least data theft and those risks were not there from that perspective. But challenge started for the new project, new product development. Of course, while talking about this, we are still talking about the on-paper activity or on-computer activities. The core manufacturing activity, when there was a very strict lockdown during that time, it was practically standstill. Irrespective of whatever we say, we couldn't do anything. Only good part is during entire lockdown, we almost had every day management review, and then we were just looking for all how to utilize this time creatively to diversify the business, to ramp up new product development, and how we do that. Entire focus was on that. As an outcome of that, even means though we were using Zoom and Teams little bit for video conferencing, suddenly we started realizing that the collaborative platform for NPD is essential. Again, if you know manufacturing, typical NPD falls into two categories like PLM and then normal data sharing. So in our business for aerospace business, we went for PLM, which was there already. So these guys did not suffer. For traditional business, we did not have PLM. So we very swiftly moved to entire Microsoft team deployment for collaboration. More than video conferencing, the entire focus was on collaboration. And collaboration means bringing everyone on. Entire new product development actually started happening on that. And that, trust me, that happened. Entire deployment rollout of Teams happened in 1 month. I will never imagine that kind of thing happening in manufacturing, and especially company like ours.
Yes.
And where people supported, of course, IT has to work round the clock. But then that now, if you ask anyone how whether they will be able to operate without collaborative environment, no. It has changed during last 1 year totally. Coming back to Industry 4.0 part of it, at least I will say when operations were down, of course, we couldn't do much. But then when operations started, of course, for many months, we were allowed to operate with very less manpower. And that's where actually Industry 4.0 started giving its fruits. From two perspectives, I would say. So no one was wasting time in preparing anything operational information. So all the information, including OE, quality, planning, everything was available real time to everyone. That is first thing. Second thing, even the condition monitoring, where if you have limited resources in maintenance, if that person is getting proactive information from machine in terms of some failures, or if some machine is going to fail, that we started able to operate in very less manpower, and that was only feasible due to since this infrastructure was in place actually. And and then again during that time also some of the projects we took where there was no connectivity on machine, and we quickly need machine connectivity to tackle this lockdown situation, and we could swiftly do that.
Perfect.
The third initiative which we started, I think we still are not there with respect to the virtual aspect of product design using augmented reality. So where, because normally what you do is you do the product engineering on 2D screen. So though you are seeing 3D product on 2D screen, you don't get that feel. So that's where we started putting some investment into augmented reality during this time. And then the intention is not only the part of it, but then even the sensor information, if you could project there, it would be it would give enormous capability, and that to people sitting at their respective location. But then I think this is still a journey. Virtual design is still journey for us. Not many advanced companies in Europe, I know that they have started the journey long back and they are reached somewhere. But then we started this few months back, and I'm sure that will be there.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Yogesh. And I think I wanted four of you give a perspective of, because one challenge we all had is that how can we make our business running? And you becoming from the 4 different industry, 4 different businesses, I think a very different perspective has come together, and I'm sure this will be very beneficial for our participants of the event. I want to bring Saurabh here, and I think we are running out of the time. So very quickly, I will ask one questions again, and if you can give me an answer in 2 to 3 minutes. So Saurabh, what is your take after the pandemic? I said that I feel that this is a domino moment for the technology. But what do you think will permanently change post-COVID? And it's not that COVID is over. Post-COVID means after the COVID has hit us. What things have permanently changed and will change for our businesses? Saurabh?
See, from an operating model standpoint, I would say take it into 2 parts. Very briefly, I'll mention there's the business operating model and the technology operating model. From a P&L standpoint, as I run, the business P&L, what I see is the percentage of, the digitalization, not digitization, of the end-to-end insurance value chain has changed. Distribution models, things like more on payment and digital platforms, like versus the, traditional, man-to-man kind of on an intermediary mode. Remember, intermediation remains a very high part of the insurance industry, but that process has also been digitalized, not digitized. I would say, not for the sake of converting paper into an image and all, but more data, right? And of course, the use of more APIs, web services, and all, and the type of products. See, in the GI industry, 2020 was a historic year because for the first time, more health policies were sold than motor policy. Right, motor has been the primary, driver of the business, right? 50-55% of the business, and more health policies were there. The fundamental shift is on the product type, because rather than comprehensive products, small ticket need-based products, that has gone up. And very simple example is the Corona cover, right? The COVID-19 cover, which is selling on it. So that's from a business standpoint. I would say one common theme has been, which you mentioned, Mubin, the operating model, whether it is tech or business, has got a risk transfer model built in now. And we as insurers, right, we have cyber security policies, both for an enterprise standpoint, for large IT services, as well as from an individual standpoint, right? Individuals like you and me can cover that. So just 2-3 more points. See, work from home, partial work from all that is here to stay, right? So that is also evolving, and it is the entire data security needs and endpoint security. I think that is one more change which we are seeing. People-wise, as I said, awareness, everyone alluded to it. But things like part-time workers or gig economy, that also puts the operating model under stress, and therefore both the people process tech standpoint, needs to be looked at. And finally, I think from a operating model standpoint, the larger threat landscape has become very, very active, very broad-based. I think everyone talked about malware, phishing, impersonation, all those things. Therefore, the security posture, needs to be constantly monitored, adapted. As Chris mentioned, right, review and repeat and all that. I think this is what has changed. I would like to end from an operating model standpoint. I think everything is in our control to an extent. However, the one element which we all need to keep on working on, which at least has been our learning, is the individual. Right? Yeah. And now these stakeholders could be our customers, could be our employees, could be our partners. I think that is probably the weakest link in the new operating model, in the new world that we live in. I think that the entire strategies, procedures need to be evolved around that person and where they are, right? Irrespective of the role that they play. And it could be dual roles that they are playing. So very quickly, these are the changes that we are seeing. And many of these are either here to stay or they will continuously evolve.
Perfect. Thank you, Saurabh. And I think I completely agree with what all your points said, and the people is the weakest link still proves that. I want to quickly move to Anant. Ananta is that, see, IT services industry has built the businesses using the ODCs. And whether we like it or not, work from home has actually demolished the ODC culture somewhere. So do you think that ODC environment as one of the biggest revenue gainer is going to stay, or what is your view on that? Because that's going to change the security to look out and the IT services company. What is your take on that?
So my sense, Mubin, is that going forward, because basically what has happened is because the physicality element has got demolished in the context of what we have seen in the last 12 to 14, 15 months. I think there are some clear positives that have emanated as well, right? While we obviously have all grappled with challenges, the fact is that a lot of the things that could be easily done through a remote environment is something that inertia or that wall has at some level collapsed, right? So today there is an acceptance of this distributed model and the fact that you could accomplish many things even in a distributed environment. So to my mind, going forward, it is going to evolve into a hybrid model. When we come out of this pandemic, I wouldn't say it's going to be binary in nature. It's not going to be 0 or 1. To my mind, there would be some level of, interactions in, and whether you call it an ODC or a office environment or whatever, I think there would be some level of interactions that would continue to be needed, because there are, let's face it, there are areas of work which are best done when collaborated on the ground collectively. For instance, there could be business issues where there are multiple stakeholders who need to come together in an agile manner and kind of solve for. I think you really cannot take away or substitute those very effectively in this kind of a model. So I think a lot of the components of work which can be easily done in a remote model without too many dependencies on a cross-functional environment can be easily done. And to that extent, the footprints of real estate will go down because clearly cost efficiencies have come out. I think there are benefits that have emanated. The one other dimension which will also be very clear and to the point of the operating model to my mind is a lot of the internal systems will also get recalibrated, right? A very simple example is how do we calibrate attendance of employees, right? From a scenario where you kind of swipe your card and get into an office premise, you now need to clock and you ensure that the behavior is curated in the manner that the right clocking. So I think we will get, it is going to be a hybrid environment. A footprint will go down for sure, but I suspect it will be somewhere in between. It can't be completely out. And there is the mental fatigue factor also, which we need to keep in mind when you operate in an isolated environment, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, so Anant. And I think that mental fatigue is a very important point, and I somewhere it caused attrition also in the IT industry for the ODC environment. I want to come to Milind, and you're the only CISO, Milind, on this. I want to say that what very quickly, Milind, because we're running out of time, what role constructively, and not at the NSDL CISO, but what role constructively the CISO community has played in the last 12 to 18 months? And do you see that CISO community has got more teeth because the cybersecurity is becoming more and more a business issue rather than a technology issue? Milind? You're on mute.
Yeah, nice question, Mubin. Actually, I would say that CISOs have become enablers. If you look at a typical CISO office or a security organization of any company.
Sorry, you have to speak louder, please.
If you look at a typical CISO organization or a security post, they would always be seen as an enforcers. Every time you go to do something new, there would be a CISO organization which would come in between, a review, and most of the time that would end up saying what you should not be doing. And that is basically was the image and reputation of any information security official, be it CISO or anyone down below. In these last 12 to 18 months, I think that reputation and that image has slightly changed because the information security professionals also have understood that there is no point in giving a list of don'ts. Rather, we have to now start giving the list of do's.
Very well said.
There is no way how a CISO can refuse anyone to work from home, suspecting that their home Wi-Fi may be unsecured. CISO has to come forward and help the business to continue their operations by still protecting the organization assets while they are being accessed from an suspected unsecured assets. So that is one thing which I believe in last 12 to 18 months have happened. And because of that, the relationship between the business and technology and the security teams have become much better. Now, instead of avoiding the security team, maybe business and technology teams are approaching security team, asking that this is the challenge. What do we do so that we are also secured and the organization also continues working? So first and foremost thing is that the way CISOs look at the things, they have to focus on the sustainability part of it. I am not even talking of continuity now. I am talking of sustainability. You will somehow continue, but how long will an organization sustain unless and until there are no innovative ways to continue the working? And that is where, human capital, financial capital, and even technology capital has to be leveraged upon. The second thing is, as far as the budgets are concerned, while you called it out that yes, there will be a more flexibility given to the CISO to invest, considering the hype of cybersecurity issues and the reality of the attacks that are increasing. CISOs must keep in mind that it is their company's money. Every rupee they spend is actually from the profit of that company, and it is very, very difficult to make profit in these days. So from that point of view, CISO now becomes kind of, an indirect profit center. If he saves money, that is the profit for the organization. So these are the two things which I would like to say.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Milind. Sorry, I'm cutting you for the time. Yogesh, I want to bring you here. The last question, which I want, because I know you are also handling the digital transformation and you're the digital office for the Kalani Group. So Yogesh, one thesis which has come in the industry saying that the pandemic is actually act as a catalyst for the digital transformation. The digital transformation has gone 24 or 36 months advanced. I want to know from the practitioners saying that, is this thesis right? What is your view on it? Very quickly, Yogesh.
Yes, Mubin, I will totally agree on this, because I think overall mindset in especially manufacturing segment, I would say, because insurance segment or financial segment, they were always ahead in this curve. But then in manufacturing, after this pandemic, I think lot of push has come to eliminate all the media breaks where dependencies are there. Like whether man talking to man, man talking to machine, machine talking to man, or machine talking to machine. So wherever we could eliminate this and build a single digital thread across value chain. And that push, I think I started seeing across all manufacturing industries, people started talking about it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Yogesh, being Chris. And before I get on the question and answer, I want to ask one question. And the question will be that I will say something and you have to complete the statement. Same question, because you have four different individuals, four different. And I want a bit of informal answer, not the formal answer. So I'll start with you, Yogesh, because you'll be on the screen. Remote working is dash dash. What comes to your mind first?
Fun.
So fun. Okay.
Fun.
Okay, fun. Remote working is fun. Milind, what comes to your mind when you say remote working is dash?
Dream come true.
Sorry, say
Dream come true.
Dream come true. Okay. This is a Pune response. Dream come. Okay. If I can bring it out, saying that remote working is for you?
Remote working for me is a mixed bag with some positives and some negatives.
Some negatives, some positives and negatives. As an old timer, you still think that going to the office setup will help?
Yeah, I think that, human being is a social animal and you really can't take that out of the equation, whatever it be. So I think you have to intersperse it with the right level of interactions as well. So that's my take.
Yeah. And a giver of a technology for remote working, Saurabh, what comes to your mind when remote working is dash dash?
Has its highs and lows. For the highs, it was fun. For the lows, it was a nightmare.
Nightmare.
Yeah,
I think
especially for the IT teams and the stakeholders that we have gone through, both I would say. So.
Yeah, I think, and you being very polite, I think nightmare will be more than the fun. I can get that. Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm asking Saurabh. I think we are Saumil, we are running out of time. Saumil, one or two quick questions you think which are very critical for panelists to answer. Saumil?
So yes, I've looked at some of the questions that have come in, Mubin, and thank you panelists for your wonderful insights. I think there was one question, I've read through a lot of questions, but there's one question that I definitely would want to ask the panelists and including you, Mubin, is can we share some light on the cross-border cybersecurity threats to Indian infrastructure, right? So electricity, water, are there any innovative designs to address the prevailing risk or the upcoming risk in this particular environment?
Sure. I think Yogesh, you want to take it up because you have the manufacturing units outside India also. And when it comes about the utility threat like SCADA attack, if you want to just quickly touch about this in that cross-border terrorism.
Yeah, Mubin, I think of late we started seeing a lot of attacks on the OT side of it. And then I think that itself is a very vast topic to discuss, OT security. The challenge is that there is entire thought process gap between IT and OT. The way IT looks towards security and the way OT looks at security. But everyone started realizing this, and then there are various solutions, right from established partners to the very innovative startups which are coming up with the how to monitor the ongoing traffic, real-time monitoring of the traffic between machine and then people and then compute the data center, how to handle the edge securely, how to protect it from cloud attack. So this is a huge topic, but then I am sure that there are so many things happening in that field. But then overall, we are still 3 to 4 years away from overall matured security infrastructure there. I would say.
Okay, perfect. And I want to bring Milind a very quick input from your side because you are handling the infrastructure of critical Indian importance. So are you seeing some kind of an attacks or anything which you can share without again divulging the confidential information?
As such, as I mentioned earlier, the central systems are always fortified. There is always a
Exactly.
approach of zero trust as far as central systems is concerned. We don't even trust our own employees in that case. So
Okay.
whether they're working from the secured office LAN or from the remote home working, it doesn't matter to us. What is important is now that the new avenues have opened, like all of them are connected to unsecured Wi-Fi over VPN networks, etc. Obviously, that is the avenue or that is the place where we have got to focus on. So I think rather than the technology or other things, the attacks can be circumvented by more of an awareness. So there are going to be rise, like how COVID has its own mutants and variants. Similarly, phishing, etc., is also going to have its own mutants and variants, and it is definitely going to be more and more sophisticated. Apart from the email, people are going to focus because they know now most of the organizations would have these phishing attack related awareness, etc. They will start focusing on the mobiles of the people who are using it. They will start focusing on the voice calls, etc. So awareness has to be given. And as they are operating from the home, it is very easy, isn't it? If I have to attack, I can tap someone from the residence of the employee and say, oh, I am sorry, I am speaking from an office. So can you please quickly go to his laptop and log in and do this particular thing? So awareness of employee, family members becomes a priority now.
Right. Yeah.
So far, it was only the employees. Now we have to also look at the family members of employees. That becomes
So in true sense, it become an extended family, right?
Yes, correct. So attacks will be the same. They will be more sophisticated, and the solutions will be the same, but they have to be implemented more thoughtfully.
Thoughtfully. Perfect. I think, Soumil, if you have one more last question.
Yes, I do. I do have one more question. And this is, I think, going back to the flexibility, right? So there has been a question put out saying that while working from home might be an indicator for the future, there is a vast comparison being done between flexibility versus cybersecurity or risk related, say, information security related risk. But there's also something called digital fatigue, right? When people are working from home, there is a great deal of digital fatigue that is coming around because people are now connected for a elongated time, and it is not there is no boundaries between work and home.
Perfect. I think, Soumil, I think this is Ananta, you're the right person to answer this because round the clock digital fatigue for your employees or for the industry as such, not for your employees. Industry, what do you think that in the IT services?
I genuinely believe that is a definitive issue, and I'll tell you this. While in the short run, we have all been able to sustain and go through the motions and all that. On a sustained basis, this is, to my mind, not very optimal. And the simple reason being that, mind you, there is a lot of duress and stress on the system as well. When you look at a lot of our colleagues and employees operating from home, we are default assuming that everybody has the latitude to have a setup and a room to himself or herself to be able to operate and all that, which is not true because there are many people who are operating in environments which are not necessarily conducive. So that just adds to the stress. So to my mind, I think it is a very genuine issue, and which is the reason why I said that I would imagine a hybrid environment where it could be a scenario that in a week you have 2 days of operation from your office and 3 days or 4 days, whatever be the case, might be from home. And then again, you could have all the permutations and combinations, but I think you need to infuse the right level of moderation to all this because you stare at laptops continuously from morning to night, that's not going to be, and we will have a health problem, peaking up for all of us. So I think it's a very genuine problem. There is no easy answer, but I think organizations and human resource divisions have to be sensitive and have to curate programs that ensure A, the awareness is set in, and B, how do you go about it in a normal workday? So I think
Sure.
those are my thoughts, Mobin.
Perfect. I want to bring Saurabh here because Saurabh, your team must be working 24/7 in a crisis mode, ensuring that everything is up and running. So do you think that digital fatigue will be a challenge for your team specifically, not
It is.
organizations?
No, it is for us, not just from ours, but even for the larger group. See, what we have done is I'll go to some of the solutions. So no doubt it's a problem, right? We have got around September, October, we created something called a work from home policy. Now, apart from all the other things, right, one of the things that it addresses is put in certain best practices in terms of the right breaks in between. Morning 8:39 till 9, right? No breaks because you have typically have that environment, that water cooler kind of a thing. You walk, this also helps with the digital fatigue, the mental aspect of it. So we have built in, some of those things in between in terms of breaks. Obviously, these are best practices and recommendations. As Anand mentioned, we have those hybrid environments wherein people have a choice. So it's a formal policy that where you work completely, you can work from office completely, obviously with the lockdowns and all, but you can partially work, right? 1 week in the, this thing, and on an as need basis. So some of these things which earlier were not there are now almost inbuilt into the policy. And as I said, right, we are learning and more improvising, as we go. But the key thing is to be open in terms of feedback. Because not many things centrally, leaders can sit down and, and think that all the answers are there. I think, as Anand mentioned, very important factor. Many people who are distributed don't have the right environments, which are conducive. They actually want to come to office from a focused standpoint. On the other hand, there are people like us wherein, at least, from my family standpoint, they've said enough. Now you go to office, right? I mean, we're not spending enough time. I don't, being tired of seeing you every day, right? With everyone, my son in one room, my wife in one room working, right? So the idea is you have to be flexible. The choice has to be given, and that's the only way moving forward.
Perfect. I will not take further question, but thank you so much, Saurabh. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Ananta. Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Milind. Thank you, Saurabh again. I think this was a very productive, very insightful, and very practical discussion. That's what I liked about it. And thank you so much once again for this time and inputs. Thank you. Over to you, Somil.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our event. I just want to take some time to do some thank yous. Of course, this event was not going to be possible without the great support that we have gotten from Rajan and the CII team, of course. So I thank you very much, CII and Rajan, for being a partner with us on this report release and on this event. I want to also thank the BDO marketing and branding team to help us with the publication, the whole outlook of the publications, getting the formatting and getting the whole visualization and everything. So thank you very much for that. Of course, a big thank you to Chris for his presence, for gracing us with his presence, giving us some of the insights, the industry remarks, and of course, leaving us with some of the great thoughts related to awareness, technology, making sure that you have updated your environment to plan for the future, right? Then, of course, the great panel discussion that we've had. So thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Saurabh, Milind, and Ananta for your insights and for your patience. Of course, doing a panel discussion, it's often a lot of information is being shared. So, peacefully listening to, the individuals and also putting your thoughts in the whole process. We were constrained by some of the time. So there were a couple of questions that other people had asked. Sorry, I couldn't ask that. So I'll tell the participants my apologies due to the nature of timing, and we wanted to stick to some level of schedule. So thank you very much. And lastly, and of course not least, thank you to my two dear colleagues, Yogesh, for releasing the report. It is a milestone for us. So thank you, Yogesh, for releasing the report. And Mobin, for your great moderation, for your great input on the report, sharing the details, and of course, moderating this panel discussion. So thank you very much all. Have a wonderful rest of the afternoon, evening. Stay safe, stay masked, and try to keep social distancing. Thank you very much.